The story of a young British woman named Angel Lynn shocked the entire United Kingdom in 2020. For a long time, she was trapped in a destructive relationship with a man involved in criminal activity and frequently in legal trouble. Each time Angel tried to leave, the situation worsened. Her final attempt to escape led to a violent confrontation, a kidnapping, and an attempt on her life. By some miracle, Angel survived, but the life she leads now is far from what anyone would call normal. Before we explore the case, if you'd like to support the channel, hit the subscribe button and stay active. It really helps a lot. Now, let's get into it. Angel Lynn was born on April 18, 2001, in a suburb of Birmingham, a city in England's Midlands. She was the fourth of 6 children and the youngest daughter in the family. Her parents, Patrick, known as Patty to friends, and Nikki, short for Nicolette, lived modest lives. Patrick ran a small retail business, and Nikki dedicated herself fully to raising their children and managing the household. The Lynn family was not wealthy, but their modest family business provided a steady income that allowed them to meet their basic needs. They lived in a spacious, cozy home and worked diligently to provide their sons and daughters with a good education, raising them to be respectful, kind, and decent individuals. Angel shared a very warm and trusting relationship with her entire family, but she was especially close to her mother, Nicolette. She confided in her mother about everything, her dreams, her future plans, and her deepest concerns. From an early age, Angel was full of life, always on the move and bursting with energy. She performed well academically, participated in sports regularly, and had a wide circle of friends. People often described her as ambitious, determined, and principled, someone who always stood up for what she believed was right. She dreamed of attending college to study law and hoped to work within the justice system. Angel was also widely admired for her striking appearance and slender, model-like figure. With her radiant blonde hair and deep blue eyes, she had a natural presence that lit up every room she entered. She received plenty of attention from admirers, but she rarely went on dates, simply because she did not have the time. Angel valued her independence and was committed to building her future on her own terms. While still in high school, she took a part-time job as a waitress at a local fast food restaurant. She saved her earnings carefully, using them to prepare for college and to purchase her own clothes, makeup, and other essentials. After graduating from high school, Angel was accepted into her dream college without difficulty. She chose to pursue a career as a crime scene investigator and enrolled in a program that would help her reach that goal. She juggled her studies with work and extracurricular activities, managing it all with seemingly boundless energy. Her future appeared bright and full of promise until she met a young man named Chay Bowskill, who would eventually take everything from her. Chay Bowskill's birth and troubled past. Chay Bowskill was born on October 20th, 2000, and was the younger of 2 sons raised by Charlotte Bowskill. He grew up alongside his older half-brother, Ray Norris. Charlotte raised both boys on her own, as neither of their fathers played any role in their upbringing. Although Charlotte worked multiple jobs, often from early morning until late at night, to provide for her children, the family constantly struggled with financial hardship. She spent very little time at home due to her demanding work schedule, leaving the boys largely to fend for themselves. Their home environment was unstable, and their upbringing lacked proper structure and emotional support. From an early age, Chay began displaying troubling signs of aggression and instability that deeply concerned those around him. He would erupt into sudden outbursts of anger, frequently got into physical altercations, and consistently found himself in trouble at school and within the community. His behavior soon led to regular encounters with law enforcement. As a teenager, he was arrested multiple times. However, each time, his mother, Charlotte, intervened to protect him. She seemed unable or unwilling to accept the reality of her son's actions, firmly believing that Chay was a good boy at heart and misunderstood. His older half-brother, Rhea Norris, was not exactly a model citizen. He had his share of issues with the law, but he was less aggressive and more capable of regulating his emotions. Chay, by contrast, was volatile and impulsive. He quickly outpaced Rhea in terms of criminal activity and reputation. While still in school, Chay transitioned from being a troubled teen to a full-fledged offender. At only 15 years old, Chay became involved in serious criminal activity. He began with car thefts, stripping stolen vehicles for parts and selling them through underground networks. Soon, he aligned himself with a local gang. Within a short time, he earned their respect and carved out a space for himself. His entrance into this world mirrored his brother's path, but Chay was more reckless and far more dangerous. He had an obsession with speed and machinery, particularly motorcycles and high-performance cars. Chay did not merely drive fast, he tore through the streets as though he were invincible. Eventually, he obtained a driver's license, and for a time, he drove cars for gang members during various operations. By the time he turned 18, he had purchased his own vehicle, paid for with money earned through illegal dealings. Chay frequently consumed alcohol and used illicit substances. Despite being intoxicated, he often got behind the wheel. On one occasion, he lost control of his car and crashed into a utility pole, sustaining injuries that required hospitalization. His license was revoked as a result of the incident, but that did not deter him. He continued to drive stolen cars and even filmed his reckless rides, streaming them live on social media as if it were a badge of honor. As his involvement in organized crime deepened, Chay graduated from petty theft and carjackings to more sophisticated and dangerous offenses. He and his accomplices began stealing high-end vehicles to order and targeting wealthy individuals. He was no longer just a delinquent. He had become a calculated and increasingly violent criminal. Chay openly embraced the persona of a bad guy. He appeared to take pride in it. Although he was frequently detained and questioned by the police, he somehow avoided major legal consequences. His youthful appearance, charm, and ability to manipulate others seemed to work in his favor. For all his recklessness, Chay possessed a striking appearance and undeniable charisma. Even as a teenager, he found it easy to attract attention, particularly from young women. As his illegal ventures began to yield significant income, he flaunted his wealth to impress and seduce. He would buy gifts, flash cash, and promise a glamorous lifestyle to anyone he wanted to draw into his world. Due to his volatile temper and aggressive tendencies, Chay was never able to maintain a stable romantic relationship. He was a manipulator and a bully who frequently resorted to violence to assert control. He had no difficulty attracting attention or drawing women in with his charm and confidence. But once his true nature emerged, most of his partners would leave if they were lucky enough to do so. Unfortunately, not every girl managed to escape his grip. In early 2019, Angel met a young man named Stephen while spending time with mutual friends. They were the same age, attended the same university, and quickly discovered they shared many common interests. The chemistry between them was immediate. What began as a friendly connection quickly blossomed into a romantic relationship. In a matter of weeks, they officially became a couple. Their relationship progressed rapidly. Before long, they had introduced each other to their families, a gesture that signaled the seriousness of their bond. Parents were pleased with their daughter's choice. Stephen was polite, respectful, and came from a supportive and stable family. His parents, in turn, welcomed Angel warmly and treated her like one of their own. The couple spent much of their time together, often going back and forth between their family homes. Their connection was so strong and so evident that friends and relatives frequently joked about an impending engagement. Many believed that Angel and Stephen were headed for a future together. However, just 6 months into the relationship, everything changed. To the surprise of everyone close to them, Angel and Stephen broke up. The The separation was sudden and initiated by Stephen. To Angel, it was a devastating and deeply painful experience. The young woman who had once seemed so full of confidence and direction now found herself heartbroken and vulnerable. Soon after the breakup, Stephen began dating someone new. This development devastated Angel even further. To avoid running into her ex-boyfriend and his new partner, Angel distanced herself from their shared circle of friends. Overnight, her world felt smaller. Without her boyfriend or the social network she had built around their relationship, she felt completely alone. Although her family offered constant support and reassurance, Angel sank deeper into sadness. Throwing herself into her studies and her job did little to lift her spirits. It was during this vulnerable and emotionally fragile time that fate introduced her to someone who would change the course of her life forever. How Angel met Chay Bowskill. Angel met Chay Bowskill by chance. Her striking appearance immediately caught his attention. Always quick to act, Chay approached her, asked why she looked so down, and offered to go for a walk and have coffee together. Angel was caught off guard by the unexpected kindness and attention. She needed someone to talk to, and Chay presented himself as a patient, attentive listener, someone who genuinely seemed to care. They exchanged phone numbers and began talking regularly. Very quickly, they started seeing each other more and more. Chay went out of his way to impress her. He was generous with compliments and always seemed to know what to say. For a time, he appeared supportive, caring, and thoughtful. Before she fully understood what was happening, Angel had fallen for him. In her eyes, she had found someone who was finally paying attention to her, someone who made her feel seen and important again, trying to keep her attention and win her trust. Chay spoiled her with expensive gifts and took her to popular restaurants, clubs, and concerts. Angel attempted to learn more about what he did for work, but Chay skillfully avoided giving any real answers. He concealed his criminal lifestyle and presented himself as someone in control of his future. Eventually, Angel invited Chay to her family home for dinner. What was meant to be a peaceful and welcoming evening quickly turned sour. Chay's behavior during the visit was arrogant and dismissive. He acted as though he was doing them a favor by simply being there. His smugness and lack of respect did not sit well with Angel's parents. After the dinner, Nikki pulled her daughter aside and expressed her concerns. She urged Angel to reconsider her connection to Chay and suggested that it might be best to end the relationship altogether. Not wanting to disappoint her mother or cause conflict within the family, Angel insisted that she and Chay were just friends. She promised that she would begin seeing him less, but deep down, she was not ready to let go. After that night, the couple continued to see each other in secret. Despite her mother's warnings and the tension at home, Angel and Chay never considered ending the relationship. In fact, their connection only grew stronger, at least from Angel's perspective. Chay would book expensive hotel rooms where they would spend long evenings together. To Angel, these felt like romantic getaways, moments where she could escape from the stress in her life. She believed she had fallen in love with a kind and caring young man. Chay was in constant communication with her. They called each other dozens of times a day and exchanged messages almost non-stop. He always asked where she was, what she was doing, and who she was with. Angel interpreted this obsessive behavior as affection. She believed that his persistent interest in her daily activities was a sign of how much he cared. In reality, it was the beginning of a calculated campaign of control and manipulation. Within a few short months, Chay knew everything about Angel, where she spent her time, who her friends were when she worked, and her class schedule. Having earned her trust, he began to isolate her from anyone he did not approve of. He pressured Angel into lying to her parents and discouraged her from spending time with her family. Slowly, he built an emotional barrier between her and the people who truly cared for her. By August 2019, Chay's control had escalated significantly. He dictated what Angel should wear, forbade her from wearing makeup, and instructed her on who she could or could not speak to. He went through her phone personally, deleting contacts and blocking anyone he viewed as a threat. Any behavior outside of his expectations was met with intense questioning or outright anger. If Angel stayed out even 30 minutes later than expected, Chay would appear without warning to take her home. It soon reached a point where Angel could not even say hello to a male friend or acquaintance without it leading to a heated argument. Her parents began noticing clear changes in their daughter. Angel, once vibrant and joyful, had become pale, quiet, and withdrawn. She no longer wore makeup, dressed in oversized clothing, and seemed constantly nervous. She clutched her phone tightly and would leave the room to answer calls or reply to messages. She stopped confiding in her mother and sisters, something that had always been a part of her personality. Everyone around her grew increasingly concerned. When asked how she was doing, Angel insisted that everything was fine, that she was simply busy, but her voice lacked conviction. Her responses sounded rehearsed. It became clear to those who loved her that something was very wrong. The gap between Angel and her family grew wider with each passing day. Chay wanted complete control. He wanted Angel all to himself. He turned a vibrant, intelligent, and beautiful young woman into someone invisible, someone isolated and drained of her confidence. Angel slowly became convinced that she did not matter to anyone but him. He controlled every part of her life, from what she wore to who she spoke to, and even attempted to convince her to quit school and her job. He promised he would provide for her, but Angel, holding on to the last pieces of her identity, could not bring herself to abandon her dreams. Still, Chay's control only became more extreme. He gained access to her social media accounts, installed a tracking application on her phone, and monitored her every message and movement. He had the ability to show up wherever she was at any moment. Angel lived in constant fear. She was nervous, jumpy, and always looking over her shoulder. At his urging, Angel even had a tattoo of his name inked onto her arm. It was not an act of love, it was ownership. Chay treated her like a possession, not a partner. He would call her relentlessly, dozens of times each day, even in the middle of the night. If she did not answer, he would demand she turn on her phone camera so he could see where she was and who she was with. The pressure became unbearable. Angel tried multiple times to end the relationship, but Chay refused to let her go. What began as a relationship built on attention and charm had turned into complete psychological and emotional manipulation. Chay was stalking her under the guise of love, severing her connections to everything that had once brought her happiness. In January 2020, Chay and several of his friends were arrested during an attempted car theft. He was sentenced to 4 months in prison. For Angel, it felt like a long overdue breath of fresh air. She believed she was finally free from the nightmare that had consumed her life. However, that belief would soon be shattered. Each day, Chay was granted a phone call from prison, and every evening, he used that call to ring the Lynn family's home number. He wanted to know where Angel was at all times. His friends who remained on the outside acted as his eyes and ears, watching Angel and reporting back to him. Although behind bars, Chay's grip on Angel had not weakened. She could feel it, the weight of constant surveillance, and there was no way to escape it. By the end of May, Chay was released from prison. His first action was to go straight to Angel's home, where he caused a loud and disturbing scene. When Angel once again told him it was over, Chay became enraged and demanded that she repay him several hundred £100, money he claimed he had spent on her before his arrest. In an attempt to get rid of him once and for all, Angel gave him the full amount from her savings, but it did not stop him. If anything, it made him more aggressive and determined. Only a week later, Chay physically assaulted Angel for the first time. And then, barely a week after that, he went after her again, This time, a bystander saw what was happening and called the police, genuinely afraid for Angel's safety. But when the authorities arrived, Angel, likely too afraid, ashamed, or emotionally broken, refused to press charges. Chay walked free. The final escape attempt. Emergency services arrived quickly, but the sight they found was horrifying. Angel was lying unconscious on the road, severely injured and unresponsive. Her body had suffered devastating trauma. Paramedics worked urgently to stabilize her before rushing her to the nearest hospital. At first, doctors were unsure if she would survive. The impact of being thrown from a moving vehicle had caused catastrophic brain injuries and multiple fractures. She was immediately placed into a medically induced coma. Meanwhile, Chay and Rocco continued driving without stopping to help. They fled the scene as though nothing had happened, but they could not run forever. It did not take long for the police to identify and locate them. Both young men were arrested shortly after the incident. When questioned, they attempted to shift the blame. Chay insisted that Angel had thrown herself from the van during an argument, claiming he had no idea she had been hurt so badly. However, the CCTV footage told a very different story. The video evidence showed that Angel had tried to escape, that she had willingly jumped out of the vehicle in a desperate attempt to get away. But it also clearly captured Chay forcibly dragging her back into the van, which made what followed an act of abduction. His actions were undeniably aggressive, controlling, and dangerous. Public outrage and the trial. The public was horrified by what happened to Angel. News of her injuries and the abuse she had endured for so long shocked the entire country. People who had once believed that violence only came from strangers began to understand that danger can come from someone close, someone who claims to love you. As Angel lay in the hospital, fighting for her life, her family was devastated. Doctors informed her parents that her injuries were so severe she would likely never fully recover. Angel had suffered extensive damage to her brain and would require round-the-clock care for the rest of her life. She could no longer speak, walk, or even feed herself. The life she had dreamed of, becoming a crime scene investigator, going to university, living independently, had been stolen from her in the most brutal way. And all of it because she trusted the wrong person. The trial that followed brought some measure of justice, though no sentence could undo the damage that had been done. Chay Bowskill was eventually convicted of kidnapping, coercive and controlling behavior, and perverting the course of justice. He was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison. Rocco Sansom, who had been in the van during the incident, received a 21-month sentence for his role. Many people, including Angel's family, believed the sentence was far too lenient for the horror Chay had caused. There was public outrage over the verdict, with thousands signing petitions demanding a harsher punishment. After an appeal, Chay's sentence was increased to 12 years. But for Angel's parents, no number of years could bring back the daughter they once knew. Patrick and Nikki now dedicate themselves to caring for her full-time. Their home was remodeled to meet Angel's medical needs. They have become powerful advocates against domestic abuse, coercive control, and violence toward women. Angel Lynn's story is a chilling reminder that abuse often begins in subtle ways through control, manipulation, and isolation before escalating into violence. It is also a story of survival, though one marked by heartbreaking loss. Today, Angel continues to fight. With therapy and ongoing medical support, she has shown small signs of progress. Her family remains hopeful and committed to her recovery, no matter how long it takes. The aftermath of the attack. The van continued driving for approximately 100 yards as if nothing had occurred, then gradually slowed down and turned back toward the scene. To any onlookers, it might have appeared as though the driver had dropped something small and, after reconsidering, decided to return for it. Chay remained calm as he approached, telling the people gathered that the injured young woman was his girlfriend and that they had just had an argument. He claimed that he had told her he wanted to end the relationship, and she had lost control and attempted to take her own life by jumping out of the moving van. However, his explanation did not sound very convincing. He stayed at the scene, waiting for the medics and the police to arrive, repeating the same story word for word. It was clear that he believed Angel would not survive, and he was trying to place all of the blame on her. His friend Rocco, who had also been in the van, supported his version of events, repeating everything he said. Despite her critical injuries, Angel was still breathing. She was transported to the nearest hospital in an ambulance, but her chances of survival were minimal. She had suffered broken ribs and limbs, a compression fracture in her spine, and numerous cuts and bruises across her body. The most severe injury was the traumatic brain injury that had resulted in extensive bleeding in her brain. For several days, doctors fought tirelessly to save her life. She underwent numerous extremely complex surgeries, including the removal of part of her skull to alleviate the pressure on her brain. Her heart stopped multiple times. She was clinically dead, and each time the medical team managed to resuscitate her. Eventually, she was placed in a medically induced coma and connected to life support. The likelihood of Angel ever regaining consciousness was nearly non-existent. The doctors were astonished that she had not died at the scene, but their outlook was bleak. They cautioned the Lynn family that even if she miraculously survived and regained the ability to breathe without assistance, she would remain bedridden and in a permanent vegetative state. They even suggested removing her from the costly life support equipment, but her parents refused to consider it. Chay and his friends were apprehended at the scene and taken to the police station for interrogation. Both men denied any responsibility and insisted that Angel had been behaving irrationally, claiming the incident occurred because she had attempted to take her own life. However, surveillance camera footage told a completely different story. Chay faced charges of abduction, unlawful restraint, and inflicting grievous bodily harm. His companion was charged as an accessory, and the two remained in custody while awaiting their respective trials. The proceedings officially began in January 2022, during which further accusations, including assault and intimidation, were introduced. Neither defendant accepted responsibility, and since prosecutors lacked conclusive proof that Angel was intentionally ejected from the moving vehicle, the jury failed to reach a unanimous verdict. As a result, both men received comparatively lenient penalties. Rocco received a sentence of merely 2 years for his part in the crime, while Chay was given a 7-year term. In March, that already mild sentence was contested. Chay's legal representative argued that the punishment was excessive, noting that he had no prior record of violent offenses and requested a reduction. Fortunately, the court dismissed the appeal, and the prosecution's request to extend the sentence from 7 to 12 years was approved. Still, Chay became eligible for parole after completing 6 years. Despite the bleak outlook from medical professionals, Angel continued to fight for survival. Although her brain had suffered extensive trauma, she eventually began breathing without assistance, and after several months, doctors ended the medically induced coma. Initially, she showed no awareness of her surroundings, was unable to move independently, and required feeding through a tube. Her condition offered little hope of recovery. By spring 2022, her parents brought her home to provide full-time care. Then, in May 2023, nearly a year later, Angel stunned everyone by beginning to react to stimuli. The following month, she turned to her mother, Nikki, and softly spoke the word, "Mum." Today, Angel Lynn remains in intensive rehabilitation and has even managed to take her first few steps. Physicians do not offer much optimism regarding a full recovery or return to her previous life, but her family refuses to lose hope. To them, Angel has already shown that she possesses extraordinary strength and determination. Thank you for watching. You can help my channel grow by pressing the like button, leaving a comment, and sharing this video with others. Your engagement truly makes a difference.